You talk to anyone about the Equalizer, and there's one scene everyone remembers. The moment Robert McCall takes revenge on the Russian gangsters who beat a young woman. The scene is stylized, justified, earned, and almost mythic in its precision, so much so that it ranks as one of the most watched fight scenes on YouTube. And today, I want to take a closer look at why watching McCall execute a group of cocky gangsters is not only unforgettable, but strangely enjoyable. From the framing to the choreography, the visual language is all working together to give us our first real introduction to who the Equalizer is. And that's important because this is the first fight scene in a film marketed as an action movie, and it doesn't arrive until 30 minutes in. For those unfamiliar with the setup, Denzel's character, Robert McCall, visits a Russian gangster who pimps women. One of his girls, Terry, played by Chloe Grace Moretz, has just been beaten and hospitalized by the Russian gangster. McCall isn't there to fight, he's there to buy her freedom, to end it cleanly. But when the gangster mocks him and refuses his money, something shifts. What unfolds is less of a brawl and more of a controlled detonation. Up until this point in the story, we as the audience really have no idea who McCall is. For 30 minutes, we're left to build our own assumptions. We piece together that he's particular. Everything has its place with McCall. He has a sharp eye for detail, he times everything he does, he's friendly with his co-workers but clearly values his solitude. We get the sense that he's retired from his original job, but what that was, we're never told. We're led to believe he's just an average man living an average life. Quiet, disciplined, unremarkable. And that's exactly what the film wants. Because when this scene finally happens after a slow burn of an introduction, we the audience are completely stunned. Suddenly, everything we've spent 30 minutes observing about McCall, his routine, his attention to detail, his discipline, snaps into focus. And just like that, the slow opening of the film feels completely justified. Now, in the setup before the fight, the framing does a lot to throw us off balance, while also making us feel the immediate danger McCall is in. Typically, in visual storytelling, the characters with power are framed from below, so we're looking up at them, emphasizing their dominance. Conversely, characters with less power are often framed from above, diminishing their presence in the scene. But here, director Antoine Fuqua stages the scene in a way that unknowingly unsettles us. The Russian gangster remains seated behind his desk, while McCall stands. Visually, this gives Denzel the high ground. We're looking up at him, not the gangster. On the surface, it places him in a position of power, even though he's the one who has stepped into the gangster's den. But there's more going on. In the wide shot, McCall is surrounded, boxed in by the henchmen. He's visually confined. On a subconscious level, it throws us off, because while the framing says power, the composition says trap. And that contradiction builds a quiet tension, a sense of unease that something is off. It plays into the larger idea that, up until this point, we're still trying to figure out who McCall is, whether he's really in control or completely out of his depth. There's also this selective close-up on McCall, where the foreground and background are completely out of focus. It's a shot we cut to only a few times when they're talking. On one level, it shows us that McCall is zeroing in. His focus is razor sharp, even as tension builds around him. But on a more suggestive level, the blurring of everything around him isolates him entirely, not just visually, but thematically. It subtly tells us that McCall exists in a different world entirely, one that the men in this room can't begin to comprehend. He's being insulted, mocked, laughed at, but this shot is already warning us. The Russians have no idea who they're dealing with. And when the violence finally begins, it confirms what this shot quietly promised. It's otherworldly. The Russian gangster more or less tells McCall to fuck off, but before he leaves he does something unexpected. He repositions 3 decorative skulls on the gangster's desk to face each of the men. It's a beat that's darkly funny, almost absurd, and yet it perfectly crescendos the tense standoff we've just witnessed. Most action films would have the protagonist threaten the antagonist. "I'm going to kill you," or something like that.
"Before this war's over, I'm going to kill you."
But here, McCall lets the skulls do the talking. It's showing the foreshadowing rather than telling. And what makes it even more impactful is that just moments earlier, McCall had adjusted the skulls out of obsessive discomfort, a character detail that builds on his compulsive need for order. He now disrupts that same order, a very telling story beat. As McCall heads for the exit, we get another revealing character beat. he opens and closes the door 4 times before finally locking it. On the first open, the camera cuts to a close-up of his face from outside the room. Most of it is obscured by shadow, half covered by the edge of the door. It's as if the frame is telling us, we're about to see the part of McCall he himself has been hiding. The repeated opening and closing could be read a few different ways. Maybe it's tactical, testing the door's weight and resistance, assessing whether it could be kicked in from the outside. But what feels most resonant, especially given that this moment lands right at the classic call to adventure beat in screenplay structure, is that it represents a decision. He's deciding whether or not to go through with the violence. And when he closes that door for the final time, we get a quick insert of him locking the door. He's made up his mind. The insert shot is highly stylized. It's framed from an extreme low angle, with the camera tilted on a Dutch angle. The effect is subtle but deliberate. The off-kilter frame paired with the extreme low angle injects a jolt of unease in the otherwise controlled edit, a visual signal that something is about to snap. He turns back to face the Russian gangsters, and what follows is one of the most stylish and telling sequences in any modern action film. We begin with a wide shot of McCall, which slowly pushes into an extreme close-up of his eye. The camera moves into the reflection of his iris, effectively taking us inside his mind. A light pulses, mirroring the images flashing in his head, and helping to create a sense of tension, momentum, and an eerie calm before the storm. If you read the original script, it tells us exactly what McCall is doing in this moment. He's scanning the room, identifying weapons, calculating kill zones on each man's body, and measuring the time it will take to move from one to the next. A detail that is critical when this shot ends, because McCall mumbles 16 seconds to himself and presses the button on his stopwatch, his prediction for how long it would take to execute the entire room. It's an absurdly dark, funny beat when you remember we've already seen him timing how long mundane things take in his life, always trying to better himself, and here he's doing the same thing. There's no warning from McCall, he simply begins walking forward, calm, deliberate, as if he already knows exactly how all this will play out. His kills are precise, methodical, nothing is rushed. His fighting style isn't aggressive, it's reactive. He lets his opponents make the first move, then dismantles them using their own momentum. We immediately get the sense that he's highly trained, and the film reinforces that through his subtle choices. Like when he stabs one of the gangsters without even looking, just 2 quick thrusts, clean, efficient, automatic. Or when he reaches the last man standing, he pauses. He doesn't rush in. He lets the man strike, effortlessly deflects the blows, even takes a second to size him up, and we even see him counting his time throughout it. The final man drops, McCall stops his watch, and we get one of the funniest and most telling character beats in any execution scene. He glances at the time, sees he's a few seconds behind, and looks mildly dissatisfied, as if he could have done it faster, recognizing he's gotten a bit slow. Now, I don't usually enjoy fast cutting in action scenes. I want to see the fight play out, I want to appreciate the choreography, but I'll make the case that it works here. Just like Denzel's character, we as the audience don't fully understand who McCall is. We're left to piece him together slowly across the entire film, and even then, we never get a complete answer. So in this scene, his first display of violence, the rapid cutting actually reinforces that sense of mystery. The editing denies us a full view of his skill set, just as the story denies us a full view of who he really is. I don't think this was an intentional creative decision, but it still functions in a way that deepens the character's mystique. McCall walks over to the Russian gangster, the one who insulted him, and sits beside him, watching him die. He explains, almost clinically, what's happening to the man's body, the loss of blood, the racing heartbeat. He tells him it'll all be over in 30 seconds. He literally counts the man to death. What's so telling about this moment, beyond the calm brutality of it, is the blocking. Technically, McCall is still framed from a higher position. His eyeline is above the Russian, so the camera accommodates for that. But the fact that he chooses to get down to the man's level says a lot. It's a subtle reminder that McCall never saw himself above this man, despite his lethal abilities. He could have ended him without a word, but he offered him a peaceful solution. He offered money, mercy, a clean way out, and the Russian spat in his face. This moment on the floor isn't about dominance, it's about clarity. A final visual reminder for both the gangster and the audience. The Russian did this to himself. And then there's the final line McCall says in this scene.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. At first it sounds like an apology to the dying man, but we later learn it's not. It's for someone else entirely, a woman he once loved, someone he promised he would never go back to this life of violence for.
I promised someone that I love very much that I would never go back to being that person.
And with his final line, the scene becomes more than an action-packed killing spree. That quiet "I'm sorry" isn't just guilt, it's grief. Grief for the promise he broke and for the version of himself he can no longer be. And as the film unfolds, we watch that choice ripple outward. The peaceful, mundane life he tried to build is slowly stripped away, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but the man he was trained to be, the Equalizer. What makes this scene unforgettable isn't just the violence, it's the precision of it. It's the build-up, the restraint, the unexpected elegance in the way McCall moves, thinks, and acts. Every visual detail, every line of dialogue, every beat of editing serves a deeper purpose, to show us not just what this man can do, but why he does it and what it costs him. It's not just another generic action scene. It's a mini masterclass in cinematic language, tense, stylized, and deeply character-driven. It's the reason The Equalizer has earned its place as a cult classic.